For now a prison ship lies waiting in the bay. No light the fields of Athenry, where once we watched a small free bird flying. Our love was on the wing, we had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. By lonely prison walls I heard a young girl calling. Nothing matters, Mary, when you're free. Against the famine and the cold I rebelled, they cut you down, so that we might raise our child with dignity. Low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched a small free bird flying. Our love was on the wing, we had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. Two ducks out in the rain. One fell. One had blue eyes, the other had green. One said hello, one said goodbye. They both went to bed behind the big sty. One little duck with blue eyes went down the rain. Went down with the rain. It got so wet he couldn't dry himself. He was wet forevermore. Little duck. Two little eyes my monkey has. Two little eyes my monkey has. Okay. Two little eyes my duck has. Three blind mice. Blind mice, three blind mice. See how they run, see how they run. They all go after farmers' wives, they all go after farmers' wives. Three blind mice, three blind mice.
We always tend to think of the good things in life and forget more things. But one thing I remember is from the National School. It was a day long ago when this strange man came in and he had a gallon of sweets with him. I was down in low infants in short pants, and the master divided a gallon of sweets amongst us, and we all got 10 or 15. He took out sheets of paper, tore them up, and gave each of us a fist of sweets, and the first thing after putting one in our mouth, what we did was we counted how many we got and compared the number with the people alongside us. But I always remember that for that particular reason. But that was not the reason why we were given the sweets. The reason why we were given the sweets was that the man who's alongside me now was leaving Carriginima and travelling halfway around the world as a missionary to the land of Korea. I had never heard of Korea then. I have heard something about it since then. I know that it is divided in two, that North Korea is communist and that South Korea is a country something on the size of Ireland. But even though it is the size of Ireland, it has a population of something in the region of 40 million people. I know that the religion of that country is turning towards Catholicism, and one of the men who works on that is Father Jack Roche, the man who I'm speaking of. Father Roche, why did you go to Korea first?
At first I joined the Columbians, the Foreign Mission Society, to go to the foreign missions somewhere in Asia. But it was after I was ordained, the Columbians appointed me to Korea. And like you, James, I didn't know much about Korea at that time. And I was a little bit afraid of the assignment I got. So, but from looking at it from today, it was a very happy assignment because life in Korea has been very good as a missionary.
What year did you leave first of all?
I left in September 1960, and we left Cove by boat, and it took us 5 days to get to New York. We got very seasick, but that journey was rather enjoyable because the boat was big and there were about 1,000 passengers, so we enjoyed that trip.
And you met some relations then in New York when you got there?
Yes, when I got to New York I met my brother Stevie, who was in America, and I met my uncle Jim Roche. I'd never met him before. That was the first time I met him. He's still alive in New York. He's about 95 now. But I met him and they gave us a great welcome. So just after I arrived in New York, even though I felt lonely leaving Ireland, I felt almost at home again.
Yeah. How long did you stay then in New York?
I stayed in New York for about 1 week.
And then you travelled?
And then I travelled to Chicago, and from Chicago to San Francisco. And after 1 week in San Francisco, we got on a different type of a boat.
What type of boat was that?
It was a cargo boat with space for about 12 passengers. And the 12 passengers were 12 Columbians, 10 Irish and 2 American. And we were going to both Korea and Japan, half and half.
As missionaries?
As missionaries.
And you went across the Pacific?
We crossed the Pacific. It took us 28 days. But seeing that we crossed the international date line, I think it was 29 days.
Yeah. What did you eat on that boat journey?
The food was good when we started out, but they ran out of some of the food we liked here in Ireland. We ran out of potatoes the first day out, and we ran out of milk about the third day out. So we used to have bread and the corn, maize corn, and black coffee for the next about 27 days. Usually the boat had all supplies, but this particular boat ran out of supplies just when we left the harbour.
Did you like the coffee?
No, I didn't like the coffee. We never drank coffee in Ireland. It was my first time drinking coffee.
No milk.
And no milk. We had sugar, but we didn't have any milk. Black coffee was kind of poor.
What about fresh water?
Well, they had water anyway. It was fresh water, I think. But we were out at sea, so I think it was fresh water. But they had a very good supply of fruit, apples and oranges and bananas. They had a very good supply of that, so that was very helpful.
Right.
And the other food stuff was short.
So, the day you came into the national school with the Gaelic Swedes, you left Ireland. You left from Cove on a liner, travelled by liner from Cove to America, spent a week in New York, went from there to Chicago, went across America to San Francisco, and got on what we call this tramp boat to cross the Pacific, and that journey took 28 days. When you went to the other side of the Pacific, where did you land?
The first landing was in Japan, and we spent 1 day in Japan. And actually we were to spend 3 days in Japan, but because the Japanese workers worked so well, they got all the unloading and reloading done in 1 day. So we were back on the boat in 1 day, and then from Japan we got an unexpected call. We had to go to Okinawa, which at the time was an American island just south of Japan. It's now a Japanese island. And we spent 1 day there, and then 1 day's journey we got to Korea.
When you got to Korea first, what were your impressions?
When I got to Korea first, my impressions were the hopelessness. I didn't know any language. The food I wasn't used to. Everything was, seemed almost impossible. But the Columbans were already in Korea, so we went to the Columban house, and there again we felt almost at home, so it gave us a start. The first Columbans who went to Korea, they must have had a very tough time, but we had the Columban house. We got there, and we were almost felt at home again.
What month of the year was that then?
That was the end of November.
Yes. How was the climate like at that time of year?
It was very cold. There was snow on the hills, there was snow on the road when we got there, and it was very cold.
Yeah. What did you do then after reaching the Columban house?
After reaching the Columban house, we spent 5 months studying Korean, and during that 5 months the Mass was still said in Latin, so every Sunday we used to go to the parishes and say Mass. But we couldn't talk to the people, we couldn't hear confessions, we couldn't do anything. But because the Mass was in Latin, we were still able to say the Mass. So that's where we spent that first 5 months, learning the language and helping out in parishes.
Okay, when you had some of the language picked up, you were sent to a parish, I presume?
Right, after 5 months I was sent to a parish, and still didn't know much language. So I was given the easiest work that a curate could do.
Was it in the city or out in the country you were?
It was in the city.
Which city?
In Seoul City.
That's the capital.
The capital city.
Yes.
And my parish priest was a Columban from New Zealand. And there was a lot of Catholics there. They were still very poor. It was still just after the Korean War, so things were still very poor in Korea.
We're talking now about 1951 and 61.
Talking about 1961, very early 61, the spring of 61.
Yes. How poor were the people? How would you describe their poverty? Or
The people were very poor. Many people could not afford more than 1 meal a day. The well-off people, and they weren't too many, could have 3 meals a day maybe, but the average people, the majority of people, almost 1 meal a day. And clothing and housing wasn't very good at that time.
now, when we speak of a meal, we think of bacon and cabbage, potatoes, milk. What were the meals in Korea like?
The main dish in Korea all the time is rice, and then some meat, vegetables, some soup, those side dishes, but the main meal is a bowl of rice.
How did you find the diet, or the change of diet? Did it affect you much?
At first it was difficult, because we were used to a very Irish type diet. At first it was difficult, because we didn't know this type, we had never eaten this type of meat.
Did it agree with you?
it didn't agree with me, and I didn't eat much of it at first.
Yes. But you became acclimatized.
Very much acclimatized. So now, if I could get a Korean meal, I would go and look for it right now.
Yes. You were sent to Parish as an assistant curate, I presume. How many people were in the parish?
There were about 3,000 Catholics. The population of the area was about 50,000 people.
And one church?
One church.
Yes. How many churches in the diocese?
At that time there were 25 churches in the diocese.
That's in the diocese of Saul?
In the Archdiocese of Saul.
Yes. And how many Columban priests were in that diocese?
There were just 2 of us in that diocese at the time.
So you were on your own?
We were on our own in the diocese, just the 2 of us.
Right. Were there many English speaking people there?
Not too many. Very few. Very few in the parish. Some in Seoul City, alright, but very few in the parish.
Right. What were your thoughts of Ireland after 6 months in Korea?
I was looking forward to coming home and seeing the cattle walking the road, and seeing green fields, and seeing fences and hedges.
How about rain?
Rain didn't bother me. It's very dry in Korea.
Yes.
But the climate wasn't the big problem. It was just what was happening. I used to long for green fields and cattle and open spaces and the potted buds very often.
Yes, I can understand. Because we must remember that you were inside in a city. You were a countryman at heart, born and reared up in the country. Had spent some time at college studying for the priesthood, but still, like, in your heart of hearts, you were a countryman. So it must have been a big change to start living in a city, was it?
Well, it wasn't the change of living in the city as much as a change in living in a different country.
Yes.
Because when I left the city in Seoul and went out the country for some reason or other, it was a completely different country.
Yes.
You didn't see stocks of cattle like you had here. You didn't see farming like you had here. As a man in Mill Street once described Korea, he was out there during the Korean War, and he came back and he said it's the only country in the world where you won't find a field.
Yes.
And because there are no fences dividing the fields, and the fields don't look like here, it's a different landscape completely. And I had never thought of this, but in Mill Street, when I heard it's the only country in the world where you don't see a field, that struck me as being very true, even though I had never thought of that myself.
Right. After about 6 months, then you were kind of settled in, shall we say, and you were working in a parish. What was your work involving?
Well, my work, because of the lack of language, there wasn't much I could do. And, I used to say Mass, hear confessions. Very often I mightn't have understood what they were saying, but I used to hear confessions. But the parish priest gave me one job, and that was to take care of the altar boys. That was the easiest job, and language wouldn't cause much of a problem there.
Yes. Well, speaking of the altar boys then, we have one of those altar boys with us now, and Father Roche might explain the circumstances in which one of the altar boys in a church in the city of Seoul in 1961 is in Carriganima on this day. Could you explain how?
Yes, well, the altar boys at that time were very good, and we used to work very closely together. And a couple of them went to the seminary to become priests. And there are 2 priests in Korea, and the one who is a Benedictine priest, Father Anthony Kong, is now studying in Oxford, having studied for 3 years in Germany. And during the summer vacation in Oxford, he came to Ireland, so he is down here with us right now. I'm very happy because I haven't met him for about 10 years. And when he came to Carriganima for the first time, we said Mass together. He used to serve my Mass at one time, but now we said Mass together in Carriganima, so I was very happy for that.
I can understand. This man is Father Kong. At one time he was Antonio Kong, who served Mass for Father Jack Roche. He, as Father Roche says, he now says Mass, and he is studying in Oxford, and he has come to Carriganima to meet Father Roche. Father Kong, what are your impressions of Ireland?
Yes, I'm very impressed here
Yes.
to see a very beautiful country, peaceful, and people are very friendly. I was longing to come here because I was brought up by several Columban fathers from Ireland. I've heard a lot of Ireland, and now finally I'm here, and I feel at home. Yes, very nice country.
Yes. As Father Kong says, he feels at home, and he says he feels an interaction between the people of Ireland and the people of Korea. So much so that even in the music and the culture of Korea, there is a reflection of the music and the culture of Ireland. And Father Kong will give you an illustration of that now.
Yeah, a little.
Yes.
암옥동들의 비리 소리 들은 산골장마다 울려 퍼지고 겨울은 가고 봄은 돌아오니 나도 가고 또 너도 가야지.
Thank you very much, Father Kong. I'm sure you recognize the air. No, he was not singing it in Irish, he was singing it in Korean. And that just illustrates how much the work of the Columban Fathers has penetrated to the ordinary people of Korea. When we speak of Korea, we speak of South Korea. But you must remember that at the present moment, Korea is divided in two. North Korea is communist, about 20 million. South Korea, a country about the size of Ireland, and has a population of about 40 million. Father Kong, you were actually born in North Korea.
Yes, I was born in North Korea in 1950, and just before the Korean War.
Yes.
And during the Korean War, we came down to South Korea. It was a little funny story. We were waiting for rescue on the coast, and then came a ship, a tanker.
Yes.
It's an American ship,
Yes.
and the captain saw a lot of people on the coast waiting for rescue. He ordered to throw out
The oil.
the oil into sea, and he received a lot of people.
Yes.
I was there, my family was there, and we could come down to South Korea. But because of that, this captain was tried for a long time.
Yes.
Yes, and finally he was freed. But after Korean War, he became Benedictine.
Priest.
No priest, but Benedictine brother
Oh, yes.
in New York. Recently, I have come to know him, and I wrote him. I couldn't meet him, but I heard he was very happy to hear that I became a Benedictine monk in Korea.
Yes. Thank you, Father Kong. Jack, there has been a lot of stories about the war in Korea. It is almost like the troubles in Ireland. I suppose there are many incidents that happened that people still talk about out there.
Yes, the war in Korea was a very fierce war. When the communists came over on the 25th of June in 1950, they just shot and killed people as they moved south. And in the first couple of days of the war, there were a couple of Columban priests were shot by the communists. Now, Father Kong has an interesting story, and I think maybe I will tell it for him. At that time, Father Kong's grandfather was a very fervent Catholic in the parish of Mukko in the east coast in Korea, and the parish priest there was an Irish Columban, Father Paddy O'Reilly. They both went to Father Kong's grandfather's house when the communists came to the town to hide for a little while. But the communists found them and they took both of them out and shot them. So Father Kong's grandfather and the Irish Columban, Father Paddy Riley, were shot together by the communists in about the second week of the Korean War. I have tried with Father Kong's father and with other people from the area to find where his grandfather was buried, but we have failed to find any remains. All we know is he was shot, and where he was buried we still cannot know.
Yeah. We'll move on now to the present day in Korea. Have things changed much now from 1960 to 1984?
A tremendous change. It's a completely different Korea now to what it was in 1960. In 1960, as I said earlier, people were poor and the average people just had one meal a day. Housing wasn't good, their clothing wasn't good. Nowadays, those very same people, they have very good houses, they have colour television, telephone, some of them driving their own cars, good furniture, and when they invite you to a meal now, it really is a thrill to sit down at those houses because they are living well. Economically, Korea is doing very well, from the smallest toys to the smallest little things you need around the house, right up to radios, tape recorders, watches, clocks, motor cars, and right up to the big machinery, the bulldozers and the earth moving machinery, and further still into the shipbuilding. Korea is really on the up move, and most Koreans have the hope, and I think they were going to do it, of catching Japan within a few years.
So that's tremendous. Strides have been made in Korea in those 24 years.
Right.
Now, as an outsider, you coming back to Ireland, what are your impressions of Ireland over those 24 years?
The first few times I came back to Ireland, I saw tremendous improvements. I still see improvements when I come back this time, but there is a feeling of a lack of hope in Ireland right now. Factories closing down, the young people who are leaving school, where are they going to get employment? This might not be a reality, but and I can't know yet what it is, but I get the feeling from the people that Ireland needs to pick up and move in some direction. In Korea, there's a tremendous feeling of hope. When I come back to Ireland this time, there is a feeling of we don't know what direction we're going.
You went out in 1960, you came back first in
I came back first in 1966.
Yes, and you went out again.
I went out again in 1967.
And you came back?
I came back after 2 years.
Yes, that was 1969.
1969.
Yes. Do you think things were moving well then in 1960?
They were moving very well. Those first times every time I came back, they were moving well. This is the first time that
things were stagnant.
Yeah, well, I don't know myself whether they are, but from what I hear, people are worried about school leavers, and people are working about factories closing down, and people seem worried about not about the prices of things, but about the prices of producing things, the prices of machinery, the prices of fertilizer, the prices of feedstuffs, the price for the farm products, beef, cattle, milk, seems still good, but the cost of producing seems to be going too high, and the margin of profit seems to be a problem. And then the opportunity for employment, for jobs, for the school leavers seems to be a problem.
Yes. Going back now to Korea, are you still working in the city of Seoul?
No, I'm working in a city just outside of Seoul, in the city of Pucheon.
What is the population of Pucheon?
The Pucheon city itself is about 500,000 people, and in that city there are 7 parishes. Those 7 parishes, 3 parishes are Korean priests, 4 parishes are Columban priests, Of that four, three of those priests are Irish and one is Australian at present.
And how many people are in the parish you are working?
The parish I just left, there were about 3,000 Catholics in that parish, and the number of people altogether in that parish was probably about 50,000 people.
And do you concentrate in your work on the 3,000, or do you try enlarging the 3,000?
Actually, in Korea, we work with the Catholics, but every week there are so many new people come into the church wanting to believe, wanting to become Catholics, that we don't go looking for converts. They come to us.
What is the religion or belief or faith of the other 67 odd thousand?
The Protestant churches would claim about maybe 6%, and outside of that the people would claim to be Buddhist. But the Buddhists in Korea are not a church-going people. They don't go to the Buddhist temples, they just say they believe Buddhism. So because there are no temples close by, the temples are in the mountains, so those people like to come to a church, and the Catholic Church seems to have a tremendous appeal for them. So they come and they want to learn about the Catholic Church, they want to get baptized, and when they get baptized they get very active in the church. They want to go and bring in other people into the church, but more than that, once they get baptized they want to join the organizations within the church, and they're very much attracted to the Vincent de Paul type organization. Just after they're baptized, husband and wife, young husband and wife, will join the Vincent de Paul. They will visit the poorer people in the area. They will collect money and food and clothing and give it to those. They will visit the sick and the old in the area. These new Catholics, they seem to have the spirit which the first Christians in Jerusalem and the Christians back in Jesus' time seem to have.
Yes.
Care for their neighbour, care for those among us who are suffering for some reason or other, because of poverty, because of health, because of some reason. And these new Catholics are very good to their neighbour.
Have you schools attached to the parishes?
No, we don't have schools attached to the parishes, except in the very rare case. So because of that, another problem comes up. Christian doctrine teaching to the Catholic children in the parish. We have to do that at the church. So in most churches, in all churches right now, one Mass on Sunday is the children's Mass. And after the children's Mass, the children break up into their classes in the church, in classrooms that are already set aside with teachers. So the infants, junior infants and the first class up to sixth class, they all have their own classrooms, and they have at least one teacher per classroom. A class of maybe 30 or 40 kids have one teacher, and very often two or three. The one teacher teaching, the other two teachers running errands, keeping the kids quiet, working. And this is all volunteer work.
Yeah, and this is on Sunday.
This is on Sunday, but those teachers, they teach the kids on Sunday. They go to Mass with the kids during the kids' Mass. They keep the kids quiet, they lead the kids in prayers, they lead the kids in singing. When the Mass is over, they go to the doctrine halls with the kids, they teach them, they keep them quiet, they teach them their prayers, and then they send the kids home. But during the week they have a meeting and they discuss what they're going to teach the kids next Sunday. So actually these volunteer teachers would be spending maybe sometimes 4 or 5 hours a week working to teach the kids on Sunday, and it's all voluntary work.
Would you describe for us now what an average day's activity for yourself would involve?
The weekends are very tough. Right in my parish right now, the first Mass of the Sunday, of course, is the Saturday evening Mass. And then Sunday morning, the first Mass is at 7, second Mass is at 9, the next Mass is at 11, and then an evening Mass at 7 o'clock. Those 4 Masses every Sunday. But
Do you say that?
I say all the 4 Masses and the Saturday evening Mass. But very often people want to get married on a Sunday afternoon. The reason for that is because they're working during the week and the guests for the wedding are working. So Sunday afternoon is a very popular time for weddings now. So very often you have a wedding on a Sunday afternoon. And the problem is, if you have 2 weddings in the afternoon, if you have 1 in the afternoon, that means 5 Masses on the Sunday. If you have 2 in the afternoon, that means 6 Masses on the Sunday. During the spring and autumn, it's not too bad. But during the hot summer, it's tough. And during the cold winter, it's tough.
Yes. What about the weekdays then?
Weekdays, generally you have a Mass, either a morning Mass or an evening Mass in the church. And apart from that, you can have house Masses or weddings or funerals. These Masses come up. But in a parish of 3,000 people where I was, you have several organizations, and there are meetings all the time, every day almost. There are 8 Presidia of the Legion of Mary, and they have their weekly meetings. The teachers I mentioned a little while back, they have their weekly meeting. The Marriage Encounter have their meeting. The Crucilistos have their meeting. The Vincent de Paul have their meeting. The Parish Council at least once a month, and sometimes maybe 3 times a month. So you have all these meetings and preparation. Then you have the catechumens. You have maybe 150 catechumens all the time studying, and every Christmas, every Easter, you have maybe 100 people for baptism. But these people are coming for instruction, so they are coming, at all hours of the day, and you're busy with that. And then another problem which we used to have in Korea, if one of your patients went to a hospital in Seoul, and they were the hospitals they used to go to because we were relatively close to Seoul, about an hour away from Seoul, there was no chaplain at the hospital, so you had to go and visit those. And the traffic in Seoul now is quite difficult, so you have to go to a couple of hospitals a week around Seoul in places difficult to get at. And this was a difficult problem. If there were a chaplain at the hospital, you didn't have to follow, but because there was no chaplain, you had to follow your patients to no matter what hospital they went.
When did you have Saturday evening Mass first?
The Saturday evening Mass has been on for maybe about maybe 12 years.
How is the parish fixed financially?
The parish I'm in is financially it's doing well.
Is that the case with every parish?
No, that's the city parishes are doing well. The country parishes are still finding it rather difficult to meet their expenses. But in Korea, the parish expenses are quite high because of all the activity you have around the church. This Sunday school we mentioned about the children and their teachers, the middle and high school students, they also have a weekly class at the school. And all the work you do around the parish budget goes quite high, and no matter what you do, you cannot keep it down. So the running of the parish is expensive, but the people are paying well in the city parishes. In the country parishes, they're still not able to manage.
Have you always been in a city parish?
No, I've been in a country parish. I've been right on the line between North and South Korea, away out the country, where the nearest priest to me was more than 3 hours drive. That was lonely work, but because they were country people, very happy work, peaceful, happy work. In those parishes, financially, it was very difficult.
What do these country people work at?
Mostly farmers, and in the villages and towns, very small businesses, shops, but mostly farmers.
When you speak of farmers now, what type of farming?
Rice farming, and where they cannot do rice farming because the land isn't level enough, some sort of vegetable or root crops like corn, the maize, they used to do quite a lot of potatoes and stuff like linseed and these vegetable, the vegetable oil producing stuff. They would do some of that. Potatoes and sweet potatoes, the corn, and sometimes barley. They wouldn't have wheat or oats, but barley would sometimes they would take.
Do they grow the potatoes like we grow them here?
Much the same as we grow them here, but apart from this year, the potatoes aren't too good here this year. But the potatoes in Korea are much, they're not as good as the potatoes we have here this year. But generally, they're not as good as the Irish potatoes.
What sort of work is involved in the rice farming?
The farmers plant the rice seed very early in the spring in a very level patch of ground, and when it's grown about maybe 6 inches tall, they pull it and then they transplant it one stalk at a time in about 6 inches or 1 foot of water. They have their trousers rolled up above their knees and one line right across the field, and they all put down one sprout, and then they go back maybe 6 inches and put down one sprout. And while they're doing this, very often they're singing, and while they all the time stoop down and their backs are sore, they want to keep happy and they sing. And when they have worked for maybe about an hour, they sit down and they drink some, it's not Guinness, but some local stuff, and have something to eat and back to work again.
Is this home brew?
Sometimes homebrew, but the government, if they're listening, I wouldn't like to say that.
It is an alcoholic beverage.
An alcoholic beverage.
What sort of proof is it? Is it strong?
It would be about the strength of beer. It's made from, it used to be made from rice. Now it's made from barley. Actually, when you drink it, it's kind of grey in colour. It almost tastes like buttermilk, the old buttermilk we used to have. And but after a couple of cups of that, it's a different feeling than the drinking buttermilk.
Have you tasted some of the beverages in Ireland? The drinks?
Yes, I tasted Guinness. Yes, and I find it very good, very good drink. Yes.
So the ad is correct when it says Guinness is good for you.
I think it is for good for my health.
Yes.
Yes, but I may not drink a lot.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes.
What do you think of the food in Ireland?
I don't have any difficulty
Yes.
in Irish food. Because I don't know which food is difficult, might be difficult for me.
Yeah.
But
How does it taste to you?
taste sometimes it is salty,
Yes.
a little salty, but I don't find any difficulty in Irish food.
Have you difficulty in understanding the Irish people speaking?
Yes, sometimes I can't understand at all people speaking, but I try to understand, and they are, I believe, they have very warm hearts, and they are very friendly. Then just sometimes I just smile, and they understand me. I think, and in this way we can communicate.
You saw a game of football between Cork and Kerry on the television shortly. What did you think of it?
It was quite exciting, and I haven't seen before I came to Ireland. I haven't even heard about that, but today while I was watching, I was I found it very exciting, and the player must be very tough man.
Yeah.
Or yes,
Yes.
it is quite hard work, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you prefer Cork or Kerry?
Well, I'm independent, in fact, but I have a lot of friends in Cork. Then if I went to football, then I would support Cork.
It's probably safer to say that, especially in the company of Father Jack Roche. Father Roche, you have an interest in games. What do you think of Gaelic football at the present time?
Gaelic football is, it's still the same good game that it raises our blood, when we see the Cork and Kerry games and the big games. But Kerry seems to be dominating the game a little too much now, and that seems to be a pity. Cork probably have as good a football team as Kerry, and they've had that good football team well down through the years, but it's just they don't seem to put it together on the day. But football is still that exciting, and it's the game I'd love to watch. I didn't go to Killarney today. The big reason was I didn't have a ticket, and if I have to walk into that game and stand in the crowd, tall men stand in front of me and I can't see the game, so that's a very disappointing day.
What games are played in Korea?
Korea are very interested now in soccer, also baseball, volleyball and basketball. And in the volleyball and basketball, the ladies teams are quite good. In Asia, they're the best in Asia for many years, and on the world scene, the Korean ladies teams are doing very well. Boxing, the lighter weight boxing, they're doing very well. They have world champions. They've had about 6 or 7 in the light weights over the past 10 years. I don't know whether they've any world champion right now, but they've had world champions over the past 10 years or so in the lighter weight.
Do you get any chance of playing any game yourself while you're out there? Or do you keep any of them?
I do a little bit of walking and I play a bit of golf, but it's not easy to get either done. When first I went there, I played some soccer, but the ground condition is so different to the Irish ground condition. It's not a grass pitch, it's a gravel or a hard pitch. And when I played soccer, what I used to like to do was to slide on the soft surface and knock the opponent. But you cannot do that on a gravel ground. You have to you have to play the ball and forget about the opponent.
When are you going back again to Korea?
Around the end of the year, possibly after Christmas.
And what are your thoughts going back?
Well, I'll be sad leaving, as I am every time, but I will be looking forward to going back. And this time, as every time, I won't know where I will be working when I go back. But the Bishop and the Vicar General in the diocese I was working in for the past 4 years, they have offered me a new parish. Now that is a cut-off of an existing parish. There will be no building of any sort. We will have to rent a building for the first couple of months and then have to build a church. And I'm not looking forward to that sort of work. Maybe 20 years ago or 24 years ago I might have. But as you get a bit older, building isn't that enticing.
I understand. And have you any final message for the people at home?
Well, I have, a lot of things to say to the people at home. What missionaries always look for is the prayers and the support of the people at home. This is very important to somebody on the missions, to know that your friends at home are praying for you and are thinking about you. Also, we would like to see other people from this area come to Korea If not, to spend your life there. At least come for a couple of weeks and we'll show you around and we'll have a good time.
Thank you, Father. We have been listening, talking to two men who are really involved in their work, and it goes without saying that they are really happy people. And on my own behalf, and I'm sure on your behalf, we would like them to wish them the very best in the future.